Hey everyone, excited to be here tonight. So we're going to be talking tonight about different factors that can affect mental health and performance for largely student athletes, though this can apply to athletes at any level. My name is Dr. Erin Ayala. I'm a cyclist and I'm a sports psychologist, researcher. I'm on the US OPC Mental Health Registry. I'm also a certified mental performance consultant through the Association of Applied Sport Psychology. Lots of mouthfuls. One thing that's important to know is I'm able to practice in multiple states thanks to some updated legislation that has come through since the pandemic. And then chill zone bouncer is something I wanted to chat about, recognizing we've got some high school families and coaches and teams will be watching this. We created with one of the local high school state leagues here in Minnesota, we created a chill zone this year to support the mental health of the student athletes. So this is at mountain bike races. Think of cross country would be another really great venue or outlet for this, as well as track and field, other outside sports where there's a lot of things going on. We called it the chill zone, and it's this sectioned off space at the end of the course, right when students finish. And it's taped just like cross-country tape, the yellow tape with the stakes in the ground. And then we have those inflatable loungers underneath the 10 by 10 canopy tents. And this is the chill zone. No parents are allowed and no coaches are allowed. This is a place for the student athletes to come de-stress, decompress, and get away from the stimulation of race day. So I have since been called the chill zone bouncer by some of those student athletes. So that's always something fun for others to think about. A really cool strategy. I'm happy to talk to folks anytime about how we implemented that because it was pretty cool. So we're going to start with a brief reflection. And really we'll just turn it into a discussion and talk about different things that all of you have kind of seen over the years in sports and athletics. And then I'm going to talk about some of the research that I've done in this area, which is pretty pivotal. We're working on a big assessment right now, which everyone here will be able to get that assessment and take it for free and get some feedback on their own athletic wellness and performance. We'll talk about what the research says is ultimately what most important, and then we'll have plenty of time for question and answers and discussion at the end. So to get us started, I'd like you to think about your experiences in sport. This can be as a parent, as an athlete, as a coach, as someone who works in the sport industry. And I want you to think about the athletes who seem to have figured out how to get the optimal or how to maximize their mental health and performance. And then you can use the Zoom chat. We have a small group, so you can also just jump in if you feel comfortable doing that. Think about what are the actions, thoughts, and feelings that those athletes seem to have or display to maximize their mental health and performance. What does that look like? What actions, thoughts, and feelings do these athletes display?
I would say one action is resiliency.
Yep. Say more about that. Any examples you can think of?
Just like, I don't know, quarterback. I played football, so quarterback throws an interception and then next drives down the field 80 yards, touchdown.
Yeah. Being able to bounce back really quickly, being able to let go of mistakes.
I think something else is like joy for your sport. I think a lot of successful athletes feel just happy to be able to go out and play, whether they do well or not. Obviously, every athlete wants to do well, but I think just having the joy to have the opportunity to go out and play is a big thing for successful athletes.
Yep. Yeah. And really, I think of it as the opposite of athletic burnout, right? Is holding on to that motivation and really being having that desire to get back in and just enjoy the process. Any other things you can think about?
What comes to mind for me, if I can just jump in, would be utilizing anxiety when it comes up. So getting excitement from it and using that as a driving force rather than a deterrent.
Yeah. So being able to noticing the butterflies, the racing heart, and being able to respond to it of okay, I'm excited about this, as opposed to, oh my gosh, I'm super nervous. I'm not going to be able to handle this. Yeah, that's huge.
I would also say balance, just like a balance with their sport, not just going all in on their sport and that's like the only thing they do. They probably have spend time with their kids, go to their kids' games or practices, be involved with their lives, just like having a good work-life balance really.
Yep. Yeah. And this applies to everyone, right? It applies to the parents, to the coaches, to the student athletes, anyone working in the industry. That balance, I think, is crucial. Yeah. Any other burning things you want to add before I start to tell you what we did with this? Cool. So what we did as a sports psychologist a few years ago, I realized, if an athlete, let's say they have a physical exam or they go to a doctor, they may take a screener for anxiety or depression, and it's going to be a symptoms inventory. And then they may get treatment, they may go to therapy, they'll take the same symptoms inventory again a few months later, or for their next checkup or for their med check. And if the symptoms are reduced, we can assume that the treatment has been successful and that they're doing better. For sports psychology, we don't really have anything like that. There are some inventories that are out there that are symptom-based, and it's about like stress and psychological symptoms, but nothing that is all about like health promotion and what athletes could and should be doing to maximize their mental health and their performance. And that's what sports psychology is all about, right? If you think about it from a rehabilitation model, we can reduce symptoms of depression and anxiety. And then athletes are like, yeah, I'm good. Like, I'm doing my thing. But what about the enhancement and kind of going above and beyond and thriving and flourishing and really excelling in performance? That's the side of the continuum that we often miss with these types of things. And so I launched a huge research study a few years ago on to try to identify what are these factors that really maximize mental health and performance for athletes, because we know that these two things are interrelated. You can't have one without the other, at least not in a sustainable way, right? And so we recruited subject matter experts. We got, I think it was a total of 38 ultimately. I asked my colleagues in my network, I said, who are the people in the field who know mental health and performance inside and out? Who are the experts? And we wanted to make sure we also had a breadth of perspectives. So we got Division I, Division II, and Division III athletes. We got a couple of high school athletes. We got coaches. We got a professional race car driver. We got one of the most like world-renowned coaches in gymnastics who has since retired, contributed. We had one of the mental health chairmen of the NBA contribute. So we really brought in the big dogs for this one, and we asked them this one question. Think about your experiences and reflect on your experiences in sport. What are the thoughts, actions, feelings that athletes display to really optimize and maximize their mental health and their performance? What does that look like? And so then what we did, we got a list of, I think it was like 250 actions, thoughts, and feelings from all of the experts. We cleaned all of the data, we simplified it, and then we got it down to about 100. And we sent it back to them. And we said, okay, now look at this list. And I want you to tell me how important is each of these things for mental health, and how important is each of these things for performance? Because if you think about it, like foam rolling and mobility, pretty important for performance, especially like in certain sports, especially like I work with a lot of figure skaters and gymnasts and dancers. If they're not doing mobility work, they're going to have a hard time. And so the other thing can also happen where like mental health, like feeling like you belong on your team will totally affect performance, but it will really hit your mental health hard if you feel like you're the only one or you feel like you don't belong. So I wanted to ask both. And then what we did is we put them, say, like basically it's an online module. They had all these little index cards. And I said, I want you to sort these into piles based off of similarity and content. So think of it as a card sort. And I want you to label each of these clusters or categories. And so we crunched all of the numbers, brought everything together, and we got 7 categories. So rather than me telling you about all 100 plus items tonight, we're going to talk through these 7 different categories. reminding ourselves that all of these affect mental health and performance for athletes. We don't want one without the other, because we also know athletes may have a really good mental health game, but if they're not performing well, they're not going to be satisfied. And same vice versa, right? And so I'll talk through each of these. Feel free to interrupt and ask questions if you have them. I'll be providing some samples of what each of these categories includes and looks at. And then you'll have the link for the full assessment at the end, so you can take it and get feedback on your own mental health and performance if you'd like to. So first one was team relationships. And I'll go into depth with each of these. The next one is intentional or deliberate practice. Managing setbacks or kind of dealing with adversity is another one, really similar to what Marcus said about the resilience. Self-awareness is really big. This also includes self-compassion. So that's really important to note, which I'll touch on. Social support, which is different from team relationships. Mental skills, think of this as your sports psych skills that a lot of people think of. And then stress management. So these are the 7 core clusters to mental health and performance, and they totally affect one another. So when you look at the correlations between these, they're all very much related. If you get really good at stress management, chances are you're going to get good at these other things as well. So team relationships, this one really ultimately comes down to feeling like your coaches and teammates and the people who are really kind of in your training world. It could be trainers, it could be medical staff, athletic trainers, for example, feel like they care about your well-being, and not just as an athlete, but as a person, right? You feel like you've got meaningful relationships with your teammates. So this is really where, like, thinking about onboarding freshmen every year, where the seniors can really step in and help to make sure that the new players really do feel like they belong. This is where the coaches can really step in to help with like icebreakers and other team building and team bonding activities, because we know if people feel like they don't belong, they're not going to excel and they're not going to stay in sport, right? So the team relationships is crucial. Another thing that I love about this one, and I do a lot of work with high school athletes, and I often see this, is they don't necessarily communicate with their coach about what's going well and what isn't. And it's really hard as a high schooler to do that, especially with power dynamics, especially if they want to go and play in college, because they don't want to like say something the wrong way or be seen as like why they don't want to ask for feedback and for it to be seen as if they just want more playing time, when they really want to learn, like, what am I doing wrong? What should I do better? So the one about like be open and honest in conversations with coach and then communicate clearly with coach. These are really, really important, especially for the performance side of things, because they can get really constructive feedback about how to improve. And then same thing with teammates, have honest conversations with them, talk about mental health, talk about your physical well-being, talk about how you're doing, right? The next area is called intentional practice. Think of this as like the dialed athlete who like has their act together. They're pretty good at focusing on the little things. One of the big things that came up, and I'll kind of nerd out over this in a little bit, is celebrating small wins is really important. And this is something that I see a lot of athletes forget about, especially like injury recovery and rehabilitation. Those of you who are familiar with ACL tears, for example, that final 20% of the recovery process is so hard. And it's really important to help athletes make sure that they're celebrating those small wins, even if it's like range of motion or strength, for example, because they may lose sight of all of the progress that they've made. Be on time, be prepared. This is huge. Follow the guidelines to prevent injury and burnout. More isn't always better. It's like being like really regimented and following the guidelines, following the instructions, the routine, right? Minimize stress on recovery days. I often say, especially to my adult clients, like, your rest day is not the day to run a bunch of errands and like get all of the housework done, because that's not rest. That's not recovery. You're not letting your body absorb that training stress, right? Good sleep habits is huge. We know the importance of sleep for psychological health and well-being, for emotion regulation on and off the field. We also know from a muscle and tissue repair perspective that sleep is crucial for muscle recovery and tissue recovery. So for injured athletes, you've got to double down on your sleep. This is a really, really important one. I'm recently working with a client who's had a pretty severe stress fracture and stress reaction that turned into a stress fracture, hasn't been getting a lot of sleep. And so we recently focused more on like, how can you make sure that you're getting more of that to support your recovery? Finally, refraining from alcohol and drug use. There's more research coming out, especially with Whoop, the fitness band company, on how alcohol affects recovery. Speaking from personal experience and what the research says, it does not do yourself any favors when it comes to recovery and performance. So I know, especially during the COVID pandemic and shutdowns, we had a lot of teams who were practicing sobriety, in part because they wanted to avoid getting COVID, and then realized their training also started to improve, which was pretty cool. Next one is managing setbacks. This is that resilience component that Marcus mentioned. Really like embrace opportunities to step outside of the comfort zone. If you're not uncomfortable, you're not growing, right? But the thing that I think is really important here is like, don't be afraid of failure, because it's inevitable in sport. If we never failed, we wouldn't still be athletes, because we'd be bored out of our minds at this point. Failure is a part of it, right? Observe and accept our thoughts and emotions for what they are. This has kind of a mindfulness approach to it, where you recognize them for what they are without judging them as good or bad. Right? Super important. Using techniques to refocus when you get distracted, being able to manage performance-related anxiety. This is exactly what Erin was saying, is like, let your anxiety work for you instead of against you. We know athletes need to have some anxiety when they're performing. Otherwise, they're going to have like kind of like a plateaued or dumbed down performance, not super fun. And then another thing I think that's important, focusing on the controllables. And then when you make mistakes, let them go. Next play mentality. You've got to focus on the play ahead instead of trying to make up for the mistake that you made in the past. Self-awareness. This one is crucial, and I think it is often missed because we don't see it as like stereotypical, like athletic or sporty. So the thing that I think is really important for this one is understand, like, it's just the self-reflection of understanding, how do I respond to failure and adversity and mistakes? And then how might my own cultural identities or experiences or my background affect that, right? Another thing to think about is just processing incidents of prejudice and discrimination or bias in sport. Thinking about, like, as a college athlete coming in with scholarships, what does that mean for you? Thinking about family circumstances. Are there any pressures that you're carrying with you? How are you raised, and how does that affect your value of achievement, for example? Especially for the like later high school and then college athletes, that's where they're starting to come to terms with who they are and what that means for them. And so this is really, really important work if we want to keep lifelong athletes in sport. Final thing in this one that's really important, separate your self-worth from training and competition. Like, you are not your sport. And there are a lot of athletes, including myself, who easily get wrapped up in this and saying, like, if you're not performing well, that you like don't deserve to be on the team, you don't deserve the opportunity. And that can be a really tricky place to be in. So try to check yourself with that when you can. Okay, a few more. Social support. Note that this is different from team relationships. Think of your team relationships as like team and coach dynamics. Your social support is like your core group of people who've got your back, who you can go to when you're really stressed. These are also the people who are going to call you in or call you out when you're not showing up as the person or the athlete they know you can be. So they're the ones who like know you inside and out and will like check in on you when you stop responding to DMs or when you start to check out or disengage, right? So this is also something about like having people who can really, who you trust, who are going to give you really honest and really constructive feedback, right? And this is something, I had another athlete recently who started asking for feedback from some of the core people in her life. And she asked for brutal feedback. One of them said, like, how about not brutal? How about honest? And that was pivotal for her. It was crucial because she was able to hear about some of the maladaptive patterns that she engages in that other people have picked up on, and they were able to give her that feedback. And because of how much they care about her and how much she cares about them, it really sunk in. And it's been able to kind of get her to this next level, which has been really cool. Mental skills, think of this as the sport psych tricks and techniques. When you have a sports psychologist who will come in, they'll often teach you one of these things, like in a team outreach or workshop. Like goal setting is huge, short-term and long-term goals. You want your goals to be meaningful. Visualization and imagery is another one that tends to come up. I don't know if it's on this one. Yes, it is. Pre-race routines. Giving yourself, or I'm a cyclist, so I always say race, pre-game routines. Give yourself 5 to 10 minutes before the game to just reset and decompress. That's huge, especially for that emotion regulation and arousal. If you're too ramped up, you've got to take some time to kind of bring yourself back down and balance yourself out so that you can really go in and perform at your best. Another thing I think that's key is understanding your why. This can change over time. And then knowing how to motivate yourself and increase that motivation when you're starting to feel burned out. So the mental skills is a really big one. Mindfulness and managing distractions with present moment awareness, those can really go hand in hand. As much as athletes dislike mindfulness meditation, the research shows it is really, really, really effective. There are some really great apps out there to help you with this. Headspace and Calm are some of the most popular ones. There are some others that are coming out. I recently found out about, I think it's called Optimize Mind Performance. Their goal is for this to become the Calm for athletes. So there are more kind of things and resources coming out to help with the mindfulness and meditation. For anyone who says like, I'm not good at it, that's the point. And so the point is for you to get distracted and then to bring yourself back and refocus. Every time you do that, think of that as a rep. So the more often you do it in practice and throughout the day, the more often you can do it in a game environment, right? So it's very much the same as like lifting or strength training. You're not going to notice any benefits after a couple of training sessions. It's the consistency over time that's really going to make that difference. And like 5 minutes a day, do it like short. It doesn't have to be like 1 hour on like one of the meditation cushions. The smaller, but the more consistent, the better. All right, almost done with these. Stress management. We've got to be flexible with unexpected circumstances. Marcus and I have experience with that tonight. We had some tech issues. You've got to be flexible with it and roll with it, right? There's no point in trying to like get worked up about the things that you don't have control over. Your energy is better spent elsewhere. And so I think this is something that a lot of athletes continue to practice. I continue to practice it. Things like the weather, the officials, the competition, we can't control that. Even like how your body is feeling on game day, it is what it is. So take it for what it is and then focus on what you can control. Another one I think that's really important is taking care of your mental health, especially during intense training periods, because that's when we tend to slip, and using counseling. If anyone needs help, who's listening to this, who wants help like finding sports psychology support or therapy support, there are some really great databases out there. You can reach out to the Hidden Opponent, to Alston for Athletes, to me. All of us will help you find people to support that. I think leveraging those resources is key to success for a lot of athletes. Another thing that's important is just self-care and taking time outside of sport, right? We all love sports. We're passionate about them. That's why we spend so much time with them. But what happens when we get injured? We need to do something else. So try to hone those hobbies and think about those other things that you like to enjoy and take time for them. Okay, so this is where it gets fun and nerdy. I'll talk you through what this means, and I promise you'll get excited about this. And I'll probably pull all of you in to get some like hypotheses from you. So the way that this works, every single dot on this map represents an action, feeling, or behavior, okay? Or action, thought, or feeling. So this one, for example, let's say it's 62. This one is going to be really important for mental health, but not so important for performance. So we asked, again, all those subject matter experts, rate each of these things, all 100. I think it was like technically 106. How important is each of these for mental health? How important is it for performance? So some of the things down here, where I was kind of bummed because one of them was journaling, and I was like, I like journaling. But this is what the experts say, okay? Some of these are going to be really important for performance, not so much mental health. So this, I think, is like a mobility or foam rolling one, right? Makes sense, important for performance, not necessarily mental health. Some of these over here, like really important for mental health, not as important for performance, right? So this might be something like talk therapy, counseling, feeling like you really belong on your team, having a really good relationship with like a mentor, or having someone you can trust who you can really talk to. So athletes are busy. Behavior change is hard. It is not practical for anyone listening to this tonight or this morning or this afternoon to take on all 100 plus of these behaviors and being like, oh yeah, I'm going to double down and do all of these things all the time, because you're not setting yourself up for success if you do that. We also know athletes are really busy and they want to get the most bang for their buck when possible. So that means we focus on these, because these are the behaviors that are seen as really important for mental health and really important for performance. This is where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. Okay. So that's this section right here. Any hypotheses or guesses on what might be in here based off of what we just talked about? And I realized that was fast. I just ran through everything.
I guess social support.
Mm-hmm. Any thoughts, Marcus or Anna?
I was also going to go with social support. That would be mine.
Marcus is like, I don't know.
Yeah, I guess I'm leaning more towards that one as well.
Yeah. So the one that was rated as like, so like the cluster that was rated as highest for both, where you get the most bang for your buck, was the managing setbacks resilience one. And so that's the one, oops, right here. And if you think about it, totally makes sense, because this shows up in mental health all the time, like observing and accepting your emotions for what they are instead of getting caught up by them, right? Letting go of mistakes. A lot of the work that I do with athletes is like, not like, don't expect perfection in life or sport. Like, you're not a bad person because that you made a mistake, right? So it's really focusing on like that resilience and being able to let go of unhelpful thoughts when they come up, being able to like name those stories that our mind makes, and then being able to let them go when they come up, right? So what we did for this that is so fun is I looked at the individual items to see, okay, what are the, like the little micro things that athletes can work on? Because I know they want some specific things. And so this is what we've got. 33, this is so cheesy. And this is when the 16-year-olds roll their eyes at me. Believe in yourself. If you believe in yourself, if you get one thing from this talk tonight, the subject matter experts, including the professional race car driver, says you've got to believe in yourself. That's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. Okay. 100, sleep. Get the amount of sleep you need. Sleep is so important for mental health and performance. Really, really hard for the high school students who are on travel teams, running around like a chicken with their head cut off, the parents who are running them around because they don't yet have driver's licenses, the coaches who don't have any boundaries when it comes to work hours. It's always happening, especially when you're in season. We've got to prioritize our sleep. 11, right here, be able to let go of unhelpful or negative thoughts rather than getting caught up in them. 48, focus on the things that you can control. 25, be able to separate your self-worth from the outcome of competition. And then 24, know when you need to take a rest or to take a break because of mental or physical stress, right? The other ones I've got on a map. I've sent Marcus, and the hidden opponent, the article that all of this stuff is based off of. So you can totally go back and like compare if you want to see where all of these numbers are. It's really interesting for anyone who really cares about the mental health and performance stuff. You can see all of these little nuances on like, what is this like 87 or 18? What are the like 99, 42, et cetera, et cetera. Pretty cool stuff. So this has since been turned into a scale, a self-report assessment that athletes can take and use, and it taps into these 7 categories. The thing that's super cool about this is they're now able to get feedback on it right away, and it's anonymous. So if anyone who's watching this wants to take it, they totally can. Coaches and athletic trainers, if you want to send this to your teams, you totally can. The athletes will get feedback that looks like this image on their finishing screen once they complete the survey. They can plug in their email if they want to, but then it's not anonymous from the data perspective, right? But if they want to save it, they can totally have their email address. So there are more things that are coming out that are really cool to kind of help athletes dial this stuff in when it comes to their mental health and performance. There's no right or wrong. There are some wrong ways. There are some less helpful ways than others. But if you want to work on something, you can start with any of these 7 clusters, knowing that it's going to kind of lift the others along with it. Okay. So that's what we've got. I'm including all of my contact information here for anyone who wants to follow up with any questions. I'm sure Marcus has included Alston for athlete contact info and hidden opponent info in the emails for this series as well. So I'm assuming it is fine for you to reach out to them as well with any questions you have. So until then, I'll open it up here if anyone has questions.
I have a couple questions.
Yeah, let's go. I'm ready.
You might be familiar with some of these questions. So I wanted to see what are your thoughts on, like, if I'm a coach, how can I create a better atmosphere for my athletes while still pushing them to, be the best version of themselves?
Yes. So this is coming from a sports psychologist who works with a lot of teens, and we talk about this stuff all the time. Also, I should say the answer for coaches is different from the answer for parents, because parents often ask, like, what can I do, for the same reasons. This generation, and by this generation, I mean Gen Z, much, much different than millennials, Gen X, other generations. Anxiety is significantly higher. Depression is significantly higher. There are a lot of reasons for this, but the old school buck up mentality is not going to work with this generation. And I have seen the negative effects from it. What the athletes who are really succeeding are doing is they know that their coach genuinely cares about them as a person. And so it's like the more you show them that you care, the more you can get out of them. So it's really like as simple as like pulling them aside and being like, hey, I noticed you're a little bit quieter today, or you seem stressed, like everything going okay? And just showing and kind of checking in. A lot of them are also really hard on themselves already. Their self-criticism levels are really high, and they are pointing out all of their mistakes and beating themselves up before they even get off the court or the field. So you can use that with them and being like, hey, like approach it with curiosity. Like, hey, what do you think happened there? Like, walk me through that. Like, no, you're good. You're not in trouble. Like, help them understand that mistakes are a part of sport, and failure is also a part of sport. Losses are a part of sport. So the less worked up you get and the more calm and chill you are, you can model that for them so that they aren't taking those mistakes with them and really carrying them home with them. Because they will continue to think about it. And I've had some athletes, they're like, I lost the game because I missed that one shot. Like, this is a team sport. You did not lose that game, right? Everyone did, right? So really modeling that. The other thing I'll say, as a coach, being really, really authentic, and also modeling failure and modeling mistakes. So like, be silly, own your mistakes, take about accountability for them, because then when the kids see that, they see everything. So when the kids see it, that also helps them feel more comfortable, like they can make mistakes as well. So the more perfect you are as a coach, the more intimidating you are, and the less likely they are to really open up about how they're feeling. So the last thing I'll say for parents, because I get this question a lot from parents, is like, how can I support my teen? The number one response I get from the teens is they just need to chill. And so what this looks like means talking to the teens, and rather than being like, what does that look like? Being like, how can I support you after the race, after the game? What do you need? I'm getting the sense that you need some space. Is that right? Is that accurate? Okay, cool. I'll give you 20 minutes. I won't bring anything up on the car ride home. I still want to talk about it because I want to learn about what went well, about what didn't, what's worth improving, right? So they can't get out of the conversation completely, but like give them the space for sure. Because it's like the overwhelming stimulation that's coming from everyone. That's why we created that chill zone with the high school cycling series, is just to let them kind of get away, knowing that then they can come back and they can be more regulated and have that conversation. So. Other questions? That was a long answer, sorry.
I do have another one. So if I'm a coach, how can I incorporate mental health into my team's dynamic? Is it like for example, do we instead of like running, because I know like for football, you know, we did a lot of conditioning and things like that, so maybe it's like a mix of conditioning and then maybe, I don't know, the team meditates, or I don't know, what are just like some tips or things that we can easily implement as coaches into our team's dynamic?
Yeah, I love that question. So depends on the vibe. The answer in psychology is always, it depends. The more authentic you are with it, the more successful it's going to be. So I know some coaches who love to bring in like grounding activities or breathing activities for like the mobility and stretching or the start of practice, being like, all right, everyone, like just let's take 3 minutes. We've all had really busy days. We're coming from different places. Some people might feel stressed, frazzled. Let's just take a few minutes for a deep breath, check in. How's everyone feeling? You can also do things like, this is a really fun one where you have everyone close their eyes. If they participate, it's cool as a coach, especially. Say like, I want everyone to close your eyes, take a few deep breaths, settle in for a second. On a show of fingers, I want you to tell me how you're feeling today on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 is like awful. You don't know if you're going to make it through the day because it's been so poor. 10 is like, this is the best I've ever felt. How are we feeling? And then as the coach, you can scan, recognizing that they're all closing their eyes to kind of see how the athletes are doing. Another one that you can do is like, I want you to think of 3 feelings. And that can help model, and you don't have to ask them what they are. They don't have to share, but that can help model, like you can feel multiple things at the same time. You can be stressed and excited, right? You can be stressed and angry, or stressed and happy. So that can be a really fun activity. I think the other thing that can be helpful is really just talking about it yourself. And again, modeling that and being really authentic as a coach yourself, being like, you know what, I've got a lot of stress today. If I seem kind of frazzled, it's because I am. I'm doing my best. You guys know that I love you. Like, I'm here because I want to be. I'm feeling a little flighty, right? Just being able to name that is important, because they will know. Like, they know when like coaches are getting irritable, cranky. They then feel like you don't want to be there when you're balancing a million things. So I think just that authenticity can be really helpful too.
Love that.
Yeah. Any others? I'll stop the screen share.
I guess if you had any advice for athletes that, you know, are in like a dark period, don't really see the light at the end of the tunnel, I guess what, you know, if you could leave them with like one piece of advice, what would that be?
Yeah, I can't pick one, so I'm going to give you 2. One is find someone to talk to, and if the first therapist doesn't seem like it's a good fit, keep trying. There are a lot of really, really amazing therapists out there. Think of it as like dating or talking to people nowadays. Not everyone is going to be a good fit, just like coaches. Not every
Yeah.
coach is going to be a good fit. So if you've tried therapy, that's awesome. Try someone else, because it is worth it. It is so worth it. The other piece of advice that goes along pretty nicely with this one is, remember that no matter how good or bad you feel at any given moment, it's going to change. And that's just the nature of emotions and feelings. They're going to run their course. And so if you are really struggling and you're darker than you ever have been, and you're really having a hard time getting through the day, remind yourself, like, this won't last. There are other brighter days ahead. Same thing when life is going great. It won't be like that forever. There will be stressful days. There will be poor days. There will be bad days. And unfortunately, as athletes, we all sign up for more of that because of the nature of sport, right? And so remind yourself that that's part of being human, is feeling really bad, and it won't last forever. And then find someone who you can talk to, who you can trust, to get that social support, who can give you the skills, tools, techniques needed to find the other side, and kind of find more light. Oh. Cool. Thank you so much, everyone. I'll stop the recording. If anyone has questions, I'll make sure I give the slides and contact information to Alston for Athletes and the Hidden Opponent, so that you can contact any of us as needed.